Hi there, Sarah. I am just taking a look at your design and wanted to give you a bit of optional feedback. Thanks for opting in. Um, a few things I think you're off to a good start. I like the direction you're going with this heading. I would probably increase the size of it. This font is really, really nice, but because council is a heavier weight, this is blending in a little bit too much. So consider the idea of making this maybe even 2 times as large, perhaps bumping council up here so you have some kind of nice alignment. Maybe you could put it maybe right underneath the T or the O, maybe of council 2, and then the youth is really, really big and in the background, and the H even comes up above the L, so you have a cool overlapping effect, and youth looks really big. Then I would take Boyd Kid Packer. See how it's just floating kind of awkwardly in this white space? You always want to follow the rule of hierarchy and attach this to something that it belongs with. So it belongs with this, but you could put it small underneath youth, or if you didn't want to do that, I might right align it with wherever this ends, this column ends, and put it right here, or even left aligned right here. Okay, so keep using the principle of white space to your advantage as opposed to tucking something up there just because you kind of have the room for it. Um, so I like the idea of having this image. Hopefully this is the image you took, or wait, did you say? Okay, yeah, I'm assuming this is an image. These are images you took, and they're looking really good. I like the colors and how they kind of all go together, especially with this nice purple. This is a really strong color format. Um, so I would probably make this image bigger. I would probably take it and use it as a full bleed and have it go all the way off the edge of the page. I can't tell if this is a shape. Let's see, it looks like it's a shape and it kind of fades. Sometimes hard with the guides to see, so be sure to turn off the guides before you turn in your final draft. Looks like it's a shape that you have on the right side of the page that fades away. But I, instead of doing that, would probably make this image really big and have it be a full bleed on the bottom. And then following this rule that you have going right here, you have it started heading in the right direction. I would just tuck a column here in the right hand green negative space of this picture and have this girl really large looking up to, the 2 or 3 paragraphs that you have right here. I would make this even bigger, jump into the character palette, and as I mentioned in the video at the beginning of this week, I think I showed you how to do this the appropriate way where it tucks down below the paragraph. You can make that W quite large. And then I would also go in and make these footnotes smaller too, so they're not so big and distracting. You can pop them up to the top, and I believe that's in the paragraph palette as well. Okay, so you're heading in the right direction here. You may or may not decide to keep this shape once you have a larger image. I don't, because it's kind of subtle, I don't have a problem with it. If you wanted to keep it there and have it end where your image ends, that could work. Um, or you could, I'm trying to think of, okay, you could have this, leave this there running across the bottom. Maybe it runs across her shirt or something and across the bottom of the page if you wanted to do that. Or you could have it run across the top of your image and go all the way across. But usually you don't want to end shapes just kind of awkwardly. Sometimes that works to do it, other times, but if it's done with not like a real purpose for having the shape where you have it, it would usually work better to have it bleed off the edge of the page and kind of go along with something that you already have existing on the page. So you're off to a good start. We just need to maybe reorganize and remember the focus of this. When you look at a magazine spread, the images should be the very first thing to pop out to you. Second should be your title, and third will be your body copy here. Be sure to turn off hyphens. It looks like you have those still turned on, so turn those off. You always want to have hyphens turned off. And then another thing is you never want to have your reader read all the way across a page. You always want to have it broken up in columns. You'll notice on this assignment, let me see if I have an open tab here. I don't. You'll notice on this assignment that the examples show the columns pretty small. They're not really very large, and so that's one of the things that you want to do is you want to allow for some negative space to the right and to the left of your columns. You never want to have them flying all the way across the page. Okay, so here's a good example that you'll see in the assignment. Look at all this negative space to the right of the column. Look at all this negative space in between where one column ends and another column ends. This also looks really good because this text is justified, so it's super crisp and clean. So you may play around in the paragraph palette with creating justified text. But look how much white space there is around this and how crisp and clean and modern it looks. And also that your eye only has to read a maximum of maybe 8 or 9 words across a page, as opposed to having to read, I don't know, maybe 30 words. That's too much attention demanding activity for today's society, unfortunately. And I would say that with the pull quote too. It would probably be better to shrink this down so it doesn't run all the way across the page. Let me zoom out again so we can get a feel for that. Okay, so be sure, following that same thing, be sure to break these into columns. This page still needs quite a bit of work. It feels a little haphazard with where everything is placed. So I would maybe take this image. You could have it so large that it kind of falls off the bottom of the page, perhaps. It has a big circle down here. And then you can do your text wrap around the edge of it, which would look kind of neat. Or you could pull it maybe this way and text wrap around it. Have your 2 nice crisp columns with some white space. And then maybe you have this type a little bit smaller and put it somewhere else on the page. So maybe do a sketch of what would work on this page first, and then go from there, because right now it's a little bit struggling. One of the things you can do is never center your image, and that usually will get you off to a better start. Okay, one thing I want to mention is see how these words are right on the very edge of the shape in the background. This is called a tangent. You never want one element to stop where another element stops. You always want room to breathe between where the element stops and another element stops. Okay, it creates some visual space so the reader doesn't get confused with their eye and merge 2 different elements into one. So make sure you bring down these lines, bring these, that quotation, the R and the S over. The E, this is probably a little too close to the edge too. So this is fully in the middle and has a good amount of space to breathe. This is a little bit too much space between youth advice and here too. You want to have the heading be close enough that it's following the rule of proximity. This goes with this more than it goes with this. And you have a little bit more room here, right? But you need it tucked nice and close and not too far away. See how the G right there is pretty close to that? Let me click on one of these too. This is a little bit more spaced out, but it still works. Okay, so here's a good example of where they have this shape. See how this goes off the side of the page? And now this one stops right here, but it stops there, and instead visually your eye still goes across because the heading is in that same color. Okay, so if you're playing with shapes, if you have something, generally it always looks better to go off the edge of the page. Something else I saw in your spread is when you have a shape or another element, you also never want to add a stroke to it. This is more of a progressive design tip as opposed to a have to, but look how cool this design looks. And you'll notice none of the shapes, none of the images have strokes. Okay, so where did I see that on yours? Okay, so down here, the purple, see how you have a black stroke to that. Remove that and it's going to make a major difference in helping your design look modern. Remove it from this one too. I would take this image and I would pull it, so it's already a nice long image. I would pull it so it goes all the way from the top to the bottom of your design. Really big, really bold, something for your eye to really focus on. Another thing you want to pay attention to is the spacing between the lines. You want the spacing between this line and this line to be the exact same as the spacing between these lines. So you need to play around with the, let's see, leading. I think that's leading as opposed to kerning. But the space between these lines, you can go into the paragraph palette and delete the amount of space, make it smaller so it's more similar to these ones. And you might need to increase the amount of space between these as well. Let me see if I can show you where that's at. Okay, so you have these, and up here. I think it's on the character palette. Yep. Okay, so this is making the space smaller. This is making the space bigger. You might need to increase the amount of space so that your accent word is still able to stand out. You have your accent word here and it's larger, but you still want those spaces to be consistent. You might need to take out a few paragraphs so that you have a little bit more room for your big images and for your maybe your focus on white space. You have some white space up here, which is really nice. And then I would recommend paying attention to details like capitalizing continued. And then I would always recommend you end on a period. As we were able to do that since there's no real article that we're trying to get this to fit into a newspaper or into a magazine. So I would end on a period so it looks nice and crisp. And this is just your guide. Okay, so yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Your colors are my favorite thing about this. Your images are looking good. Your title's off to a good start. Focus on those columns. Focus on increasing the size of your image so they're really, really compelling. And then make sure your eye doesn't have to do more work than it already is doing by reading, which people hate to do. So make sure your columns are nice, crisp, and clean. And focus on that white space, okay? I gave you a lot to think about. If you want to email me a second draft of your design, totally feel free to do that. All right, thanks so much. Bye.